A quiet drive turns chaotic. It was a crisp, serene morning as the sun cast its golden rays over Rivertown. Lisa Jefferson, the newly appointed chief of police, cherished her drive to work, a precious moment of solitude before the day's chaos began. Her black sedan glided smoothly along Interstate 47, the gentle hum of the engine providing a comforting backdrop. Lisa's thoughts were busy, reflecting on the changes she hoped to bring to her department. Lisa's journey to the top had been anything but easy. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, she had always dreamed of making a difference. Her path was paved with challenges, from proving herself in a male-dominated field to overcoming the unspoken biases she faced as a black woman. But perseverance and an unyielding commitment to justice propelled her forward, earning her respect in her community and among her peers. As she approached Exit 13, the tranquility of her morning shattered. Flashing blue and red lights filled her rearview mirror, followed by the shrill wail of a siren. Confused, Lisa checked her dashboard. Her speed was within the limit, her registration current. There was no reason to be stopped, or so she thought. Pulling over to the shoulder, she came to a gentle halt, her heart pounding slightly faster. Two officers emerged from the cruiser behind her, their expressions masked by dark sunglasses. They exuded authority, their brisk strides suggesting they had already judged her guilty of something. Lisa took a deep breath, her instincts kicking in. "Stay calm," she told herself. The taller officer, whose name tag read James, approached her window and tapped it with his flashlight. His partner, Officer Grady, remained a few steps back, his eyes scanning the interior of her car as though he expected to find contraband. "Good morning, officers," Lisa greeted, keeping her tone even. "Is there a problem?" "License and registration," James demanded, ignoring her question. His voice was curt, his demeanor unyielding. Lisa retrieved her documents and handed them over, her mind racing. The way James avoided answering her question felt deliberate, almost provocative. Meanwhile, Grady walked to the other side of her car, peering in through the passenger window as though he were conducting an inspection. "What's your business here?" Grady barked, his tone laden with suspicion. "I'm heading to work," Lisa replied calmly. She had dealt with enough tense situations in her career to know how to keep her composure. Her goal was to de-escalate, even as her instincts told her there was more to this stop than met the eye. James examined her license for an unusually long time before muttering something to Grady. The two began whispering, their eyes darting toward her occasionally. Lisa's patience began to wane. Minutes ticked by as the officers seemed to deliberate her fate. She drummed her fingers lightly on the steering wheel, her calm exterior masking a rising annoyance. Finally, James returned, his expression hard. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. Lisa blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me?" "Step out of the vehicle," James repeated, his tone brooking no argument. Lisa hesitated. "Can you at least tell me why I'm being asked to step out?" "Step out now," Grady interjected, his voice sharper, his stance more aggressive. With no other choice, Lisa opened her door and stepped out, standing tall despite the officer's intimidating presence. Their hands hovered near their holsters, a move that spoke volumes about their mindset. "You mind explaining what this is about?" Lisa asked, her voice steady but firm. James smirked. "We got a report about a vehicle matching this description involved in illegal activity." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Illegal activity? What kind of illegal activity?" Grady crossed his arms, his expression smug. "We'll be the ones asking the questions." The air grew thick with tension. Lisa could feel the weight of their assumptions pressing down on her. Her position as chief of police didn't shield her from their bias. In this moment, she was just another driver they had decided to harass. As the officers began searching her car, Lisa's thoughts shifted. She recognized their tactic, a fishing expedition based on nothing more than prejudice. She watched silently, her expression unreadable, as they rummaged through her belongings. "Nothing in the car," Grady finally reported, sounding almost disappointed. James frowned, his hand still resting on his holster. "We're going to need you to come with us for questioning." Lisa's lips curled into a small, knowing smile, a smile that only deepened the officers' confusion. They had no idea who they were dealing with, but they were about to find out. "Officers," Lisa began, her voice calm yet commanding. "I think it's time we had a proper conversation." Their arrogance would soon meet her quiet authority, and this encounter would become an unforgettable lesson, not just for them, but for everyone watching. Revelations and reckonings. Lisa stood on the shoulder of Interstate 47, her black sedan gleaming under the morning sun, an unwitting stage for the brewing confrontation. Officer James and Officer Grady, still unaware of the mistake they were making, maintained their stance of authority. Lisa's smile didn't waver as she took a deep breath, knowing the moment of truth was approaching. James motioned toward his cruiser. "Let's go. We need to ask you some questions back at the station." Lisa tilted her head, her smile widening slightly. "You're taking me to the station without telling me what I'm being accused of." James shifted uncomfortably but held his ground. "Ma'am, this isn't up for discussion. Either you cooperate or things are going to get difficult." Lisa's patience, though vast, wasn't infinite. "Officers, I'd like to make something clear. Before this escalates further, I suggest you take another look at my identification." Grady rolled his eyes. "Look, lady, we've already checked your license. That doesn't mean you're above suspicion." Lisa's smile disappeared. Her voice grew firm, with a tone that carried the weight of her authority. "Then you failed in your duty as officers, because if you had properly read my ID, you'd know exactly who I am." James hesitated, the confidence in his stance faltering. "What are you trying to say?" Lisa took a deliberate step forward, meeting his gaze with unwavering resolve. "I am Lisa Jefferson, the newly appointed Chief of Police for the Rivertown Police Department, the division you report to." For a moment, time seemed to stop. James blinked, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. Grady froze mid-step, his arms uncrossing as his face drained of color. "Chief," James stammered, the realization dawning on him like a thunderclap. "That's right," Lisa said, her voice cutting through the silence. "And right now, I'm assessing how two of my officers conduct themselves in the field. So far, it's not looking good." Grady scrambled to recover. "Ma'am, we didn't know." "That much is obvious," Lisa interrupted, her tone sharp. "What's not obvious is why I was stopped in the first place. You mentioned reports of illegal activity. I'm curious, what evidence did you have linking me to that?" James shifted uncomfortably. "We, received a vague description of a vehicle." Lisa folded her arms, her gaze piercing. "A vague description. That's the justification for pulling over a law-abiding citizen, for searching their vehicle and threatening to detain them." Grady opened his mouth to respond but faltered under her glare. "We were just following protocol," he muttered weakly. "Protocol?" Lisa's voice rose slightly, her frustration evident. "Is it protocol to harass someone without probable cause? To escalate a situation without any grounds? Or is it protocol to let personal biases influence your decisions?" The officers stood silent, their earlier bravado replaced by embarrassment. Passers-by slowed their cars, some even pulling out their phones to record the scene unfolding. Lisa turned to the small but growing audience, and then back to the officers. "Do you realize the message you're sending to the public when you act this way? You're supposed to serve and protect, not intimidate and harass. And as your chief, I will not tolerate this behavior." James looked down, his jaw tightening. Grady fidgeted, his gaze darting around as though searching for an escape. But there was none. They had been caught, and there was no denying it. Lisa took a step back and gestured toward her car. "Let's finish this right here. If you have no further justification for stopping me, I suggest you let me go. And after that, both of you will report to my office. We're going to have a serious conversation about what just happened." James nodded stiffly, his face flushed. "Understood, Chief." Grady mumbled something under his breath that sounded like an apology, but Lisa didn't acknowledge it. Instead, she walked back to her car with the same grace and authority she had shown throughout the encounter. Sliding into the driver's seat, she took a moment to steady herself. As she pulled back onto the highway, Lisa's mind raced. This wasn't the first time she had faced prejudice, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. But today was different. Today, she had the power to hold those officers accountable. And she intended to use it. Back at the Rivertown Police Department, Lisa's day took on a different tone. Word of the incident spread quickly, and by the time she arrived, several officers were already waiting in the briefing room. The tension was palpable as Lisa entered, her presence commanding silence. She stood at the front of the room and surveyed the group. James and Grady were seated near the back, their expressions a mix of shame and unease. Today, Lisa began, her voice steady. I had the unfortunate experience of being pulled over by two officers from this very department. What should have been a routine encounter turned into something much more concerning. The room remained silent, every eye fixed on Lisa. I want to make one thing clear, she continued. Bias, whether conscious or unconscious, has no place in this department. We are here to serve our community, all of our community, with integrity and respect. Anything less is unacceptable. Lisa's gaze swept across the room, lingering on James and Grady. We're going to address what happened today, not just with those involved, but as a team. Because this is bigger than one incident. This is about the culture we foster and the trust we build with the people we serve. As Lisa spoke, a sense of purpose filled the room. She wasn't just their chief of police. She was a leader determined to bring about change. And in that moment, she knew that her actions, both on the highway and in the department, would ripple far beyond Rivertown. This wasn't just about holding two officers accountable. It was about setting a standard, creating a legacy, and proving that leadership wasn't just about wearing a badge. It was about earning it. The roots of change. The sunlight streaming through the blinds in Lisa Jefferson's office cast long shadows across her desk as she prepared for the meeting. In her hand was a file containing detailed accounts of the highway incident, complete with statements from officers James and Grady. Across the table sat Deputy Chief Laura Andrews, a trusted confidant, and one of Lisa's strongest allies in her mission to reform the department. This isn't an isolated case, Lisa began, placing the file on the desk. It's a symptom of a deeper problem. Bias, unchecked authority, a lack of accountability. This isn't what we stand for. Laura nodded, her expression thoughtful. The officers are rattled, but it's clear they need more than a reprimand. This is an opportunity to set an example. Lisa leaned back, her gaze fixed on the wall adorned with plaques and awards from her years of service. It's not enough to punish. We need to educate, to shift the culture of this department. Rivertown deserves better, and we have the chance to lead by example. The meeting with James and Grady was scheduled for later that morning. Lisa had deliberately chosen to address the entire department first, setting the tone for what would follow. She believed in transparency and knew that sweeping change required collective effort. The briefing room. The room was packed when Lisa walked in, her crisp uniform reflecting her authority. Conversations hushed as she took her place at the front, her commanding presence silencing even the faintest whispers. Officers of all ranks sat in rows, their faces a mix of curiosity, apprehension, and respect. "Good morning," Lisa began, her voice calm but firm. "Today, I want to talk about accountability, not just as officers, but as human beings tasked with protecting the public." She paused, scanning the room. "Yesterday, I had an encounter with two of our officers. It was a stark reminder that even within our walls, we are not immune to the biases that plague society. But this isn't about pointing fingers. It's about addressing the root of the problem and finding solutions." Lisa walked to the whiteboard at the front of the room and wrote a single word in bold letters: trust. "This," she said, pointing to the word, "is the foundation of our work. Without trust, we cannot lead, we cannot protect, and we cannot serve." But trust isn't something we're given. It's something we earn. Every interaction, every decision, every word we speak contributes to or detracts from the trust the community places in us. A hand shot up from the second row. It was Officer Carla Morales, one of Lisa's most promising recruits. Chief Jefferson, how do we rebuild trust when it's been damaged? Not just between officers and the community, but within the department. Lisa nodded, appreciating the question. It starts with accountability and honesty. Acknowledge the mistakes, take steps to correct them, and commit to doing better. That's what today is about. Laying the groundwork for meaningful change. Confronting the officers. The room was quieter now, the officers having dispersed to their duties. James and Grady sat in Lisa's office, their discomfort palpable. Laura Andrews stood by the door, observing silently, but ready to intervene if necessary. Lisa leaned forward, her hands clasped on the desk. Officers James and Grady, thank you for coming. Let's address yesterday's incident. James shifted uncomfortably. Chief, Lisa raised a hand, cutting him off. Before you explain, I want you to listen. Yesterday, you pulled over a vehicle without sufficient probable cause. You escalated the situation unnecessarily and acted in a way that reflected poorly on this department. Do you agree? Grady cleared his throat. Yes, Mom. But. No buts, Officer Grady, Lisa interjected. This isn't about excuses. It's about recognizing where you went wrong and committing to change. Tell me, when you approached my car, what assumptions did you make? Neither officer answered immediately. Lisa waited, her silence intentional and heavy. Finally, James spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. We assumed you were involved in something illegal. And why? Lisa pressed. What led you to that conclusion? Grady looked down, unable to meet her gaze. The car matched a vague description in a call, and you didn't fit the profile of someone driving that kind of vehicle. Lisa's expression didn't waver. You mean I didn't fit your profile? Let me ask you something, officers. How often do you question your assumptions? How often do you examine the biases that influence your decisions? Neither answered. Lisa sighed, leaning back. This is exactly why we're here. Not to punish you, but to educate you. Starting tomorrow, you'll both participate in mandatory training on implicit bias and community engagement. Additionally, I'll be assigning you to community outreach programs where you'll have the opportunity to rebuild trust with the people you serve. James opened his mouth to protest, but quickly closed it. Grady simply nodded, his face etched with regret. A community gathering. The following week, Lisa organized a town hall meeting at the local community center. The goal was clear: to address the public directly, acknowledge the department's shortcomings, and outline steps for improvement. The room buzzed with energy as residents filled the seats, their faces a mix of skepticism and hope. Lisa stood at the podium, her presence commanding yet approachable. Good evening, she began, her voice steady. I'm Chief Lisa Jefferson, and I'm here tonight, not just as your chief of police, but as a member of this community. Last week, an incident occurred involving two of my officers and myself. It highlighted issues that I know many of you have faced, issues we must address together. She paused, meeting the eyes of those in the crowd. I won't make excuses. The actions of those officers were wrong. But I'm here to tell you that change is coming. We're implementing new training programs, increasing transparency, and fostering dialogue between officers and residents. Because this department belongs to you, and it's time we acted like it. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, but growing stronger. Lisa smiled, a sense of determination swelling within her. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to lead the charge. For Lisa, this wasn't just about fixing a single incident. It was about transforming the department from the inside out, ensuring that no one else would endure what she had and proving that even in moments of adversity, there is the potential for profound change. A new dawn in Rivertown. The sun rose over Rivertown, casting its golden glow on a city eager for change. Lisa Jefferson sat in her office, gazing at the stack of reports on her desk. It had been a whirlwind of a week, confronting systemic issues within the department, addressing community concerns, and charting a path forward. Each step was a reminder of how much work remained, but Lisa was undeterred. This was why she had fought so hard to reach this position, to lead with integrity and make a lasting impact. Today was special. Lisa had organized the department's first ever Community Police Partnership Day, a day dedicated to fostering understanding between officers and the residents they served. The event was designed not only to heal wounds, but also to plant the seeds of trust and collaboration. For Lisa, it was a critical step in shifting the department's culture from one of authority to one of partnership. A vibrant gathering. The town square buzzed with life as residents and officers gathered for the event. Stalls offering free food, informational pamphlets, and interactive demonstrations lined the streets. Children laughed as they climbed into police vehicles, their curiosity replacing fear. Older residents engaged in earnest conversations with officers, their guarded expressions softening as barriers began to break. Lisa strolled through the square, taking in the sights and sounds. She spotted Officers James and Grady standing near a booth labeled Implicit Bias Awareness. They looked hesitant, but Lisa noted their effort to engage with residents. It wasn't easy for them. Change rarely was, but she admired their willingness to try. Chief Jefferson, a voice called out. Lisa turned to see an elderly woman approaching, her cane clicking against the pavement. It was Mrs. Thompson, a longtime Rivertown resident and vocal critic of the police department. Mrs. Thompson, Lisa greeted warmly. "I'm glad you could make it." The older woman smiled, her expression softening. "I came to see if this was all just for show," she admitted. "But I'll say this, it feels different." Lisa nodded. "It is different. This isn't about appearances, it's about action. We're not just talking about change. We're living it." Mrs. Thompson glanced toward a group of officers playing basketball with local teens. "Well, you've got a long way to go, but I can see you're serious. That means something." Her words, though cautious, were a victory in themselves. Lisa knew trust wouldn't be rebuilt overnight, but moments like this reaffirmed her belief in the power of genuine connection. James and Grady. A turning point. Meanwhile, James and Grady stood at their booth, awkwardly fielding questions from curious residents. It was a stark departure from their usual roles, but Lisa had intentionally placed them in this position. She believed in accountability through action, and this was their chance to make amends. A young woman with a skeptical expression approached, her arms crossed. "So, what exactly are you doing here?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Trying to convince us you're not the problem." James hesitated, his usual confidence faltering. Grady, however, stepped forward. "We're here to listen," he said simply. "We know we've made mistakes, big ones, but we're committed to learning from them and doing better." The woman raised an eyebrow. "Really? And what's stopping you from going back to your old ways once this event is over?" Grady glanced at James, then back at her. "You are," he said. "The community is. Chief Jefferson is. We've seen what happens when we let bias and bad habits go unchecked. We don't want to be part of that anymore." The woman studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll hold you to that." As she walked away, James let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That was intense," he muttered. Grady smirked. "Yeah, but it felt good. Feels like we're actually doing something." The symbolic pledge. As the day drew to a close, Lisa called everyone to gather near the stage, set up in the center of the square. She stepped up to the microphone, her uniform immaculate, her presence commanding. "Today has been incredible," she began, her voice carrying over the crowd. "But this is just the beginning. Change doesn't happen in a day. It happens in the choices we make every single day. And those choices start with us." She gestured toward a large wooden board behind her, inscribed with the words, "Our commitment to Rivertown." "This board represents our pledge," Lisa explained. Officers and residents alike will write down what we commit to, whether it's listening more, acting with compassion, or standing up against injustice. These aren't just words, they're promises. One by one, people approached the board, writing their commitments with markers provided by volunteers. Lisa watched as James wrote, "To serve with integrity and fairness." Grady followed with, "To challenge my assumptions and earn trust." Lisa stepped forward, marker in hand. Her hand hovered for a moment before she wrote in bold letters, "To lead with accountability, transparency, and heart." The crowd applauded, the air charged with a sense of hope and purpose. Reflections. That evening, Lisa returned to her office, exhausted but fulfilled. The day had been a resounding success, but she knew it was only one step on a long journey. Rivertown was changing, and so was the department. But the real work lay in maintaining that momentum. Laura Andrews walked in, a cup of coffee in hand. "You did good today, Chief," she said, handing Lisa the cup. Lisa smiled. "We all did, but there's more to do." Laura nodded. "There always is. But for now, take a moment to appreciate how far we've come." Lisa glanced at the board, now sitting in the corner of her office, filled with heartfelt commitments. It was a testament to what could be achieved when people came together with open hearts and minds. For the first time in weeks, Lisa allowed herself to relax. Rivertown wasn't perfect, but it was moving in the right direction. And she would ensure it stayed on course, one day at a time. Confronting the shadows within. The aftermath of Community Police Partnership Day had left Rivertown buzzing with cautious optimism. The success of the event had made headlines in local papers, and residents were beginning to engage with the department in ways that felt promising. Yet, for Chief Lisa Jefferson, the sense of accomplishment was tempered by the weight of unresolved issues within her ranks. Lisa sat in her office, the early morning light casting a warm glow on her desk. In her hands was a confidential report compiled by the department's Internal Affairs Division, a thorough analysis of complaints, behavioral patterns, and systemic problems that had festered over the years. Lisa had requested this report on her first day as chief, knowing that change required confronting the uncomfortable truths hidden within the organization. As she flipped through the pages, Lisa's jaw tightened. The report highlighted recurring issues: officers using excessive force, racial profiling, and an alarming lack of consequences for misconduct. The names James and Grady appeared more than once, along with others who had slipped under the radar for too long. Lisa closed the file and leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. She had known change wouldn't come easily, but this report confirmed the depth of the challenge. If Rivertown was to heal, she couldn't just scratch the surface. She had to uproot the problems at their core. A department divided. Later that morning, Lisa convened a mandatory meeting with her senior officers. The room was filled with murmurs as they settled into their seats, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension in their expressions. Lisa stood at the head of the table, her posture commanding attention. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady. "I've spent the past few weeks observing, listening, and learning. Today, I want to address something that's been weighing heavily on me, and on this department." She held up the Internal Affairs Report. This document represents years of unresolved issues. It's not just numbers on a page. It's a reflection of how we've failed our community and, frankly, ourselves. The room fell silent. Lisa scanned the faces before her, noting the varying degrees of discomfort. Some officers shifted in their seats, while others stared at the table. "Let me be clear," Lisa continued. "This isn't about pointing fingers or placing blame. This is about accountability and growth. We cannot move forward until we confront our past and commit to doing better." Deputy Chief Laura Andrews nodded in support, her presence a steady anchor for Lisa. The room remained tense, but Lisa pressed on. "I'm implementing a new system of accountability," she announced. "Every complaint will be thoroughly investigated, and every officer will undergo regular evaluations, not just for performance, but for their conduct and adherence to our values." A hand shot up from the back of the room. It was Captain Marcus Harris, a veteran officer known for his no-nonsense demeanor. "Chief, with all due respect, some of us feel like we're being unfairly scrutinized," he said. "Not all of us are responsible for the actions of a few." Lisa nodded, her tone firm but understanding. "I hear you, Captain Harris. But this isn't about punishing the many for the mistakes of the few. It's about ensuring that every officer, including you, has the tools, training, and support needed to succeed. And it's about rebuilding trust, not just with the community, but within this department." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The room remained quiet, but Lisa could sense the shift. A mixture of resistance and reluctant acceptance. Change was uncomfortable, but it was necessary. The personal reckoning. After the meeting, Lisa called Officers James and Grady into her office. They entered hesitantly, their earlier bravado completely replaced by an almost palpable unease. "Take a seat," Lisa said, gesturing to the chairs across from her desk. The two officers complied, their expressions guarded. Lisa folded her hands on the desk, her gaze steady. "You've both made progress since the highway incident," Lisa began. "I've seen your efforts to engage with the community, and I appreciate that. But there's more we need to address." She slid the internal affairs report across the desk, flipping to the pages that detailed their previous infractions. Both officers stared at the document, their discomfort deepening. "This," Lisa said, tapping the pages, "is your history with this department. It's not just about the incident with me. It's about a pattern of behavior that needs to change." James swallowed hard. "Chief, I know I've made mistakes. I want to do better." Grady nodded, his voice low. "Me too. The last few weeks have been eye-opening." Lisa leaned forward. "Good, because I'm giving you both a choice. You can continue down the path you're on, with real accountability and a commitment to change, or you can walk away. But if you stay, you need to understand that the standards are higher now, and there's no going back." The room fell silent as the weight of Lisa's words sank in. Finally, James spoke. "I'll stay. I want to earn back the trust I've lost." Grady nodded in agreement. "Me too. I know it won't be easy, but I'm ready." Lisa studied them for a moment before nodding. "Then let's get to work." Bridging the divide. Over the next few weeks, Lisa implemented a rigorous program of training and dialogue within the department. Officers participated in workshops on implicit bias, conflict resolution, and community engagement. Lisa personally led many of the sessions, her presence a reminder that no one was exempt from accountability, not even the chief. One of the most transformative initiatives was a series of community ride-alongs, where residents were invited to shadow officers during their shifts. The program fostered understanding on both sides, breaking down stereotypes and building bridges. During one ride-along, Lisa partnered with James and Grady. Together, they responded to routine calls, engaged with residents, and even stopped for coffee at a local diner. The experience was eye-opening for all involved, offering a glimpse into the humanity that often got lost in the daily grind of policing. "I never realized how much people judge us before we even say a word," James admitted during a quiet moment in the car. Lisa nodded. "And now you know how it feels for so many in our community. Use that understanding to guide your actions." A glimmer of hope. By the end of the month, the changes in Rivertown's police department were becoming evident. Complaints against officers had decreased, community events were better attended, and a sense of cautious optimism began to replace the cynicism that had once defined the relationship between the department and the public. Lisa knew there was still a long way to go, but for the first time, she felt a genuine sense of hope. Rivertown was changing, and so were the people who served it. And in that transformation, Lisa found the strength to keep moving forward, one step at a time.